Hello, my name is Mark Gibbons, and I'm the current Poet Laureate of the state of Montana. And I want to talk to some poets in Montana, and so this is the idea for sort of a series of these programs. And my first guest today is a well-known poet around the state. She's a former Poet Laureate and good friend who I've been working for. She's my boss, you might say, for about 25 years. Mm-hmm. And today we have Sheryl Noethe with us. And I'm going to ask Sheryl to, if she would, just sort of read her biography and kind of get all that stuff out of the way. She has a great personal biography in the back of her last book from Foothills Publishing. So Sheryl, why don't you just give us a little rundown on who you are, and then we'll jump into some poems and talk and all that good stuff.
I was born in Minneapolis, and I began writing poetry at age 11, thanks to a single sentence that a teacher gave me. She told me that I would be an author and I would write books. That statement rewrote my life. After my first publication, an award from the Academy of American Poets at the University of Minnesota, I took my book, The Descent of Heaven Over the Lake, to New York City, where I was hired by Teachers and Writers Collaborative, sent into Harlem and the South Bronx and Eastern New York to teach school children to love to write and to find their inner lives and put them into words on the page. Eventually, I left New York and came to the West, first Salmon, Idaho, on the River of No Return, where I worked in every grade and held an after-school teacher's poetry class while rafting the river and tipping a canoe, learning to drive a stick-shift Jeep and driving it off the highway into the side of a local bar because I hadn't quite grasped the downshifting thing. My 13 years in Salmon resulted in great anecdotes, and I won a National Endowment for the Arts. I published my teaching text, Poetry Everywhere, which is 65 lessons with samples by kids. So they hear it and they go, "That's poetry? I can do that." And then they do. So one weekend, a Salmon teacher drove me over Lost Trail Pass into Missoula, Montana, where I met my husband at the infamous Luke's Bar. They were driving bikers were driving around on the dance floor, and guys were snorting coke off the booths. And he was a brave firefighter. And my friends all said only a man who was willing to walk into a burning house would marry me. My next collection was The Ghost Openings, a tribute to an old friend who blessed me early on with her wisdom. This collection won the Pacific Northwest Booksellers Association for Best Poetry Book, and at the same time the William Stafford Prize for Poetry. I was awarded a fellowship from the Montana Arts Council, and while co-founding the Missoula Writing Collaborative, a writer-in-residence program in over a dozen public schools, I put together a book called As Is, referring both to Zen Buddhism and thrift shopping. I was chosen as Montana's Poet Laureate from 2011 to 2013, and I traveled this great state on the Greyhound bus, visiting one-room schoolhouses, conferences, campuses, book festivals, many schools. During this time, I wrote my latest collection, Gray Dog, Big Sky, which describes my many hours and miles on the motor coach, the people I met, the dialogue I overheard, and my experiences with this state that treasures literature, connection, dialogue, and reading books. I live with my firemen and our rescue animals at the foot of Mount Jumbo, worshiping nature and the imagination.
Wonderful. I mean, that's like maybe one of the best little bios I think I've ever read in terms of getting it all out there and kind of seeing who you are. So you're working on a new book.
Yes, I am. It's called The Science of Coincidence.
Well, I think we should probably start with a poem of some kind.
Sure, I'd love that. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm going to read a poem called Plague Dreams.
Plague Dreams.
I am shopping for wool skirts on metal hangers, overtaken by ennui in this fancy store, no longer wanting to look at empty things. We all know someone who dies. There is nowhere to go. It came from all over at once. Smaller than fog, wet, with remarkable divots of color and dimension, not visible, without smell, it wears away our attention. We are leaking between species. Now the news reports a tiger is infected at a zoo, and somewhere in Kansas, a sick pig holds the next version of viral mutation, emerging upon us silently as snow. This will end. We can beat it. That's what we said. Until the next wave, a mutation. And the human capacity for denial are fulfilling the oceans of death. Shouting crowds mob the streets and cough and spread. They are angry at the government and the scientists, angry at schools and doctors and closed businesses. It is a major step in development when babies learn to calm themselves, to stop crying and fall asleep. All these marchers, motherless insomniacs.
Wow. Nice.
Oh, thanks.
You know, we're just probably we're just on the verge of really starting to get a lot of really probably terrific plague poems.
Yeah.
I know you remember we talked over the last year or so, you talked about having read up and studied on the plague. And so how much of that research that you did during COVID-19 led to these poems, or how much of that works its way into these things, do you think?
You know, most of this is personal experience and observation.
Yeah, right. Which is what most of your stuff tends to be.
Yeah, yeah.
You're a natural poet. I mean, I don't, what else would you're not going to write the great American novel. If you do, it's going to be in your voice
and it's going to be
poet.
Short lines.
Yeah. Well, read us another one.
Okay. In the latest New Yorker, there is an article about fusion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of the opposite of fission.
Right.
Fusion is where the atoms melt down into supercharged plasma. And it's been the dream of science.
Right, because it's not explosive.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Cold fusion. The apparatus exploded overnight when no one was present. Partially vaporized radium electrodes scorched the cement floor. Reports differ on the details of the damage in late autumn 1984. Forthcoming details were of limited help or only added to the confusion. Excess heat was not measured, and the number of neutrons detected was small. Darker sides of human nature grew in the minds of those involved. Cold fusion's fantastic approach was low-key but only muddied the waters, literally. A wonderful breakthrough by chemists, costing only a few $100s. All the news programs carried the story, along with the swift and thunderous reactions of the scientific community, all stymied in their attempts to reproduce the work, stymied by the recipe of electrolytes in 10 mixed metal salts. Scientists did what they should. They tried to repeat the experiment. The price spiked almost immediately, then fell as researchers quickly identified issues with the information, including a lack of controls, unrealistic gamma ray spectrum, and magnitudes fewer electrons than predicted. The amount of excess heat should have generated enough radiation to poison the researchers, enough energy to break 2 million chemical bonds. In a temporary suspension of certain bylaws, a symposium was hastily called. Efforts of other collaborators were unanimously negative. Another study called the research spurious, to be ignored. The results were viewed as statistically meaningless. Inconsistencies in the data suggested that instead of fusion, cells were intentionally spiked with tritium to satisfy the expectations of researchers. The claim of the scientists was redacted after it was found the neutron detector was heat sensitive to the hands that held it.
Huh.
The idea of radiation breaking 2 million chemical bonds.
Trying to conceive of all of that, and of course, there is background to this poem. You have done a lot of reading and research to start writing stuff like this, but yeah, to try to conceive of this, the idea of quantum physics and these things is very difficult.
But as a poet, it's very exciting.
Well, yeah, it is, and it's also sort of things that you kind of intuitively, I think, know as a poet. But there's sort of some validation that comes into this as you learn these things, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, it was a fraud.
Yeah.
And the fact that the neutron detector was heat sensitive to the hands that held it.
Which is so human. At its
so
root,
human.
You know, right? Yeah, it's another fraud. Yeah.
The
Very
fraud of
cool.
1984.
All
Now,
right.
this is another plague response poem.
Okay.
It's called Veterans Fund. Inside the yellow door, the armoire, and perfect silence. Light green leaves, trees, some birds, a child wailing, and faintly, a radio. The garden is tucking itself away with autumn. Slowly the flames of my father's lilies burn, still red as lipstick in the movies. Roots pull everything under. My huge, terrible heart hammers, wakes me. It's all I can feel or hear. I consider a doctor very briefly what the damage is of the earth-shaking heartbeat. When a person has been very ill in a plague, they may lose velocity and choose observation instead, undefined by speed. A location assumes mass to be read and named in the experience of human beings. The stranger on the phone was seeking a veteran's donation. I coughed and told him about having the virus. Sorry, I said, I can't help. And he said, Mrs., you are going to pull through. Then he said it again. I called him a lovely man, and he said I was also lovely. Across a continent, I felt it. The sight of another soul, a shadow slipping between days and time.
Right.
It was such a remarkable event to have this stranger say, Mrs., you're going to pull through. Mrs. He had me at Mrs.
Yeah, I was going to say he must be at least your age.
At least my age? No,
Well,
he was young.
He was young.
Yeah, he was young.
Mrs. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the world of the new world, I guess, of they, them, and and pronoun differences, those addresses, those old formal things. I don't think you hear Mrs. that often anymore. I mean, in the schools we've been changing that to Ms. for a long time.
Oh, they all call me Miss Sheryl.
Miss Sheryl.
Yeah.
Miss Sheryl. That's
Yeah.
nice.
It is.
Yeah,
For the pronouns, I want to be we and us.
there you go. As opposed to it.
Yeah, it was it last week.
Well, do you want to read another one?
I'd love to.
We're on a roll. Let's just keep going.
This one is called Immediate. In the immediate future, now is the halfway point. Immaterial aspects of time measured inside an idea. We don't want to look too closely at the world. The screen in between, a filter for the arrival of the moment. In imagination, our limbs stretch, reaching infinity. We are the middle, the cleft of the slice. In darkness, I clung to old love. When I woke, a world was lost. I had to let go of the side of the boat.
What's the title again?
Immediate.
Immediate.
The word immediate means,
Mm-hmm.
in the cleft, in the center.
In the center. Yeah, nice.
And then I was dreaming. I'm going to read you a poem about this person that died. And I was dreaming about him. And then when I woke up, the whole world was lost. And in the dream, I was holding onto the side of a boat to stay above water, but I had to let go.
That's a new poem, right?
Yeah.
Because you just told me that story.
Yeah.
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 Before you wrote the poem. I remember you waking up from a dream, and I woke up from one too, and I couldn't remember it, which I was.
I know.
Okay.
Makes me mad. So mad. So, I'm going to read you one called Submersible. I've been studying the deep Marianas Trenches. One, a micromilliliter of water film between sea and sky is simultaneously both and neither. Every life form exists in relation to this layer between light and dark, lungs and pressure, where depth is hostility. Midnight zone in the ocean, water turns black. In the abyssal layer, a few degrees above freezing, a marine snow of particles falls gently into Hades. Cells collapse at this depth, meteor deep. Spheres of new species, beyond theoretical limit, with antifreeze proteins, from the lit lantern in the jaw of a fish to electric jelly, slimy gelatinous bodies, and miles down into the trenches of the ocean floor, broken tectonic plates, and jutting mountain ranges. 2. It's so deep, said the diver, you move around with an additional dimension. You can feel the electricity fizzing in your teeth. Melville saw this ungraspable phantom and called it the key to all. 3. The concept of heroism evaporated in the trenches of the First World War. 4. The deepest, Hadal trenches, nearest to the US, became the dump grounds for pharmaceutical waste. 5. Hagfish, floor feeders that coat themselves with dead fish and noxious slime inedible to others, including the sluggish false cat shark, fringe-tipped flatheads, tube worms, cutthroat eels, and tonguefish, down to the magma vents called black smokers, where heat-loving, vent-endemic, scaly-foot gastropods attach and harden, and alchemical sea pangolins make iron from sulfur. 5. Trying to be embodied, to become something of the ever-beginning world.
What was the title of that?
Submersible.
Submersible, yeah. Trenches, wow. Lots of trenches.
And there are sharks that go
In the bottom of that trench?
way, way down.
Miles deep.
Meteor deep.
Meteor deep.
Deeper than Everest goes up.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
The ones I love are the heat-loving, vent-endemic, scaly-foot gastropods that attach to the black smokers that are shooting up all that sulfur, probably from hell. And then they adapt, and they grow scales and harden. And I think, if we survive this world, we may have to grow those same hard carapaces.
Yeah, there you go. That's the next science fiction movie for your script to write. Very cool.
Well, I told her I was going to read you one about someone I lost.
Okay.
When I let go of the boat. Grows horns. Eventually, everyone grows horns, Bob said, when the man on TV married the girl for her money. I heard the starlings in the dark singing a hymn, bereft, bereft. Every bird is edible, he told me. 9 meals away from chaos. And God said the darkness can be felt. In my dream, I almost had it. I would stir the dark sauce from the bottom, clarify it in smoke. Just as I thought I could hold it in my hands and twist the edges, the coins all rolled down into a drain, into the vent of a burner on the oven, into jagged metal of junked cars. That phone never worked. The old philosophers refused to debate the concept of zero. There is no start to it. There is no on or off. To protect us from the horrors of dreams, the body will paralyze itself, relinquish its grip. Brother of death, where we are inert, approaching nothing, but never getting near. 2. The rain darkens Buddha's massive face. Behind him, tulips blush like they invented color and nod in approval. Pushing past the laws of reason, still I see the dying man, stiffly posed in his chair under a blanket, his empty eye sockets. He does not remember being loved. He remembers working, driving, planting, careening over the prairie from the bar, shooting birds from his bed, spilling his beer. Does he recall being a monument, an Apollo? There is a place where he is never lost. He is striding into the house in his blue shirt. No apologies required.
Title me again.
Grows horns.
Grows horns.
We were watching this show and this guy married the woman for her money, and Bob said, hey, eventually everybody grows horns.
With some of that imagery, and I mean, talk about everything, and everything is in there. I mean,
Yeah.
So much is in there.
I know.
Some of it from the dream you were talking about at all, or?
Yeah. Of seeing him in this chair under blankets.
Okay, that was dream related.
Hardly there. And then,
Yeah.
does he remember being a monument, an Apollo? Because to me, he was.
Yeah. Yeah, lots of stuff. Your poems are so full of all kinds of stuff from all sorts of sources. You just put it all in there.
It's my life.
Yeah. Yeah,
These
that's
words.
that's what comes into it. Yeah, is all the stuff you're doing and dreaming and reading and watching and
Yeah.
daily life.
Here's another one for the one that died.
Okay.
It's called The Unacknowledged Death of Orpheus. 1. After only a few decades together in our youth, I continue to dream about you for half a century. Your mother chases me with a knife, and I bleed on her white mink coat. I carry on this pursuit in sleep, never lessening, never waning, until you show up with my dad, long dead, working in the garage like old friends. One night I found you hanging in ragged shreds in a closet at a party. I could pull you like a balloon through the room and outside to release you. But you kept returning, frail, compliant, and I was glad enough just for that. 2. The Greek god Orpheus continued singing as his decapitated head floated down the sea all the way to Lesbos. He sang like he hadn't noticed yet. I love that image. I think about, I could do that, keep talking, have my head up, be decapitated, and just keep talking. And I get this image of this head, and the mouth is open, and he's singing away.
I've seen a few movies like that, I'm sure, too.
Okay, can I read you another one?
Please.
This one is called Waiting.
Okay.
You can wait most of your life for a person without hope. The planet yearns to find its one true love, Earth, a globe of water where meaning never freezes. Unaware, we are making constant interpretations with no vantage point in reality beyond the body. Depending upon what instruments we use and our expectations, our knowledge is only equal to our tools, does not choose its form until we come looking for it. What is only what seems. A huge coincidence. Smoke, tricks, mirrors, cracked by dark history, moving at the speed of light, using borrowed time and a guest bounced off tomorrow. beyond a point which means there must be more. When the magician reaches into his hat, the rabbit complies or decides to be a dove, if that's what is expected. You know, they say that electrons have magnets within them, and that our gaze, our attention, our observation excites it, and they form into what we expect. We see the world a certain way due to the experiences of our body, and what we expect is the most likely thing that pulls together, because we wouldn't recognize it otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to wonder about all that, perception, reality, whatever it may be, and how that works. Yeah, interesting. So you're getting close.
I know, I've only got 2 left.
Oh, well, you go ahead and read us another one.
Okay. And this one is called Particle. Like it. Warm it with your gaze. Look for hard lines that want an edge in the form of tragedy or a great sound, nonfiction or instrumental. Needing you to define a structure, it will use the voice of a friend. You can try to put it into song or take it somewhere and hide until the rain is over and you can no longer hear the howling of the hounds. Stretch a point into a line, square the line, cube it, position it in space and give it spin. Give it some color as well. Try to name it until you run out of nouns and verbs and their various combinations, including numbers and flavors and qualities. You are forced back into the 3rd dimension. First is a polka dot, then is a ribbon, then a box unseen except for its velocity, the boom it makes when it breaks the sound barrier. So bright you are unable to see the lithe shadows moving beneath clouds, the leftover ashes filtering now down from the sky in coal black. Our weapons in our brilliance will be sticks and stones, and we will crouch at the throat of our caves without fire or wheels or language, damaged and maimed, hungry, lonely beyond comprehension, thinking only of the next atomic nucleus and the accumulation of currency. They couldn't get the dollar bills crisp enough without burning them. Marinating in oils and sauces only caused the ink to smear. No one could remember what the letters meant, but it was too tough to digest, so they gave up. Chief Seattle said, "Only when the air and water are poisoned and the animals gone, you will learn that you can't eat money."
That's great. That's good. In the beginning of that thing, I mean, so halfway into it, I was like in this animated art film kind of thing world, you know, with that whole the traciness into it, and then throughout, and then to come to Chief Seattle. That's nice.
I loved the idea about trying to cook dollar bills and eat them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, the first stanzas of this look for hard lines that want an edge in the form of tragedy or a great sound, nonfiction or instrumental. You know, it's nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love nonsense. I read a quote that talks about God is in the contrary. And I always think about you saying, you don't learn when you're in your comfort zone. You have to step out of it to learn, to achieve. And I love that idea. So I decided I would leave my comfort zone and not make narrative sense,
Yeah.
but instead rely upon the image and the movement.
Right. Yeah, and sound sometimes too, right? I mean, do you do it with sound too at times?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
not necessarily in this poem, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, right now I'm working on one about the priest's niece on her knees, said, "Please, don't be a tease." But it's not going very far.
That reminds me of seeing kids again in school. You know?
Yeah.
You get a lot of that.
Yeah, they want to rhyme.
Yeah, they like sound play.
Well, this is my last one of these new ones.
Well, I got a whole stack of books in here too. If
Okay.
you need to dig back further in the past.
The title of this one is Convulsao, and it's Portuguese for anarchy, anxiety, disruption. And I watched a documentary on Angola,
Okay.
and I had to write. The dying soldiers of Angola asked the photographer to take a picture. This is how I looked when I was alive. Colonized, enslaved, and extinguished over diamonds and oil. Many slaves escaped to Cuba and remained loyal. First world privilege financed constant war and mass destruction, massacred families, entire villages, a country. War criminals backed the attack. Kissinger and Nixon wanted to go to war with Cuba. Maybe Russia, too, for sending soldiers to fight for Angola. It was, they said, the borning of the Third World. 5 decades later, you watch these crooks in black and white film. One looks like a hound who tries to stick his snout up your dress. The other has a Nazi stink and flat, horrible head, menacing, wily, respectable. We couldn't see it from our position in front of the TV set. In a comfortable life with electricity and running water, a washing machine. We expected possessions to only increase. We accumulated competitively. The ISIS fighter and terrorist said, "Yes, we kill children, but in your country, you sleep very well. It does not make you uncomfortable." When comfort is your only concern, followed by entertainment and service, it results in death due to obesity, addiction, loneliness, and despair. You cannot try for an easy life without burgling a dying planet. Kissinger and Nixon wanted to go to war with Russia and Cuba because they supported the Angolans.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was only a little kid, but I did think that Nixon looked like he was going to put his snout under my skirt. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually had just a discussion with somebody recently about, reading for particular demographic or part of the country, and about certain topics that probably really weren't a good idea to maybe broach, Politics, obviously, and the climate that we're in being one of them. But, there's nothing really political in there, even though you can identify a couple of those people with sort of political parties. It's more of a real kind of a human thing, right? I mean, it's more about how we treat each other as human beings than anything. There's not good people on both sides when you're talking about, the Nazi party and those kinds of things. So.
And these boy soldiers, they wanted to get their picture taken,
Yeah.
so that there would be proof. This is who I was when I was alive.
When I was alive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much, and we are spoiled. We have been for a long time in this country, to those realities, except when we take ourselves over there with all of our firepower and do what we do.
Massacre, yeah.
Yeah. But I don't see how you can not write about certain things that affect you. And if you're not affected by that kind of thing, you're not really paying much attention to what's going on in the world. You're just sort of tied into your own little
Comfort
space,
zone.
your own little bubble. It's all about my own little world, I guess.
Well, I recently read, they're talking about the climate crisis. It said, we're going to have to learn to live with discomfort.
Yeah, well, that's obvious, it appears, at this point in time. that's, if according to my parents, that's the way it was during the Great Depression. You know, people just said they're going to have to learn to live with discomfort. People were goddamn hungry, you know, and that kind of thing. And I suppose maybe that's what it will take. I don't know if that will ever happen again, but something like that, some major discomfort. Climate change may be the answer. Those kinds of issues that all of a sudden make people really sort of reassess what it means to be a human being and what we have to do to survive. So how do we get into this goddamn political conversation? It's not political, is it, or is it?
Human.
Yeah, that's
is
right.
political.
I mean, and if there's nothing that addresses humanity more than poetry, I don't know what it is, right?
Right.
I mean, that's what happens. And, you know, I mean, sometimes I remember when right after, I guess it was right after Trump was elected president, and I was in classes, you know, and oh my God, all of a sudden I started getting these poems from kids, and they were like lining up on both sides of the issue and going off, and the poor teachers were fit to be tied. But it was just a perfect example of the polarization in the country and in our way of thinking in this country now, to see those kids act out in the ways that they did, and the things that they said in those poems, I should have brought something with me that I could have read a few, but they were the lines were drawn in the sand, but the ones on the one side seemed to be about humanity, and those on the other side didn't.
Hate.
Yeah, I guess maybe. I don't know. I don't know what it was. It was self-centered in a way that it was just all about victory, you know, which of course is, you know, that sort of a thing. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, to hell with that. We don't need to talk any more about that right now, probably. But I'm glad I'm glad that poem was there, because it's something that we can't ignore, and I don't think we should.
Well, like the terrorist, the guy from ISIS said, yeah, we kill our children, but your people sleep very comfortably.
Yeah, history, herstory, the coming to grips with our past and our present, and if you can't do that in a poem, I don't know. You know, I mean, obviously we do it in history books, and we do it in classrooms. Those are becoming more and more challenged as the days seem to go by. But the truth is the truth. Fact is fact. And of course, there's different sort of opinions, I guess, about the past, his story versus her story. But I mean, numbers, and it's sort of, I don't see how you can ignore history. I mean, we're a country built on genocide and slavery, period, and this stuff is still with us. So we need to just always acknowledge that. I think it's just a matter of acknowledging it.
Yes.
You can't erase it. It's just acknowledging it. You know, and saying this is what we did. This is who we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like kicking Columbus off the day and making an Indigenous Peoples Day. That's a nice beginning.
Yeah. It's not doing some, and you know, it's just a silly thing to begin with anyway. It's all that myth built on a lie, I guess. That's the whole thing, that we've been talking about living up to the rhetoric, right, of our world, of our Constitution, of our Declaration of Independence, all those kinds of things, which we've never really done. We've been talking about doing that forever, and then we acknowledge it and we talk about it, and things seem to like sort of move and improve, and then they just go right back to the way they were before. And we've been doing that all throughout our life, and right up until today. And it's obviously time, with climate change being probably a central push to get us to change, to start changing. I think doing major things. You know, readjusting the wealth distribution and all things that we need to do to take care of the things that need to be taken care of. what the hell? How did I get on this topic? You did this to me.
I did this.
Yeah. You couldn't do that.
Well, my nephew is black, and he calls me weeping. And he goes, I have your eyes. I have your blood. He said, I don't have your skin, and for that I'm hated. And then he told me, if I get pulled over by the police, I'm going to call 911 for another squad car to come and, watch the first guys.
Did you watch that American Experience the other night on TV about Helen Keller? Did you see
No.
that thing? Oh God, it was wonderful. And so, I wound up with a poem out of that.
You did.
Yeah, just because, it was just so moving. She was such of just the story alone of Helen Keller is just so incredible. And then what she did as a person who wanted everybody else to have, the true American dream, equality. And equal justice under the law and opportunity and all those things. She was a wobbly, She was a socialist at heart.
She was also a genius and one of a kind, and she kind of wrecked it for the rest of the deaf community because people are expected to.
Right. Yeah, there's the idea that she could have pulled off all of what she did and learned so much. I think it's just phenomenal.
She said that she could go into a home and smell the drapery and tell you the ethnicity of the family from the cooking smells.
Wow.
She said that when it was raining, she could see a car passing or a body passing by the interruption, by the absence of rain.
Right.
And she could put her hands on a radio and tell you French horns or violins. She was
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, just amazing. Yeah, where does that come from? What magnetic electrons are firing to, create all those
the
perceptions?
Soul.
Yeah, exactly.
She was living off soul.
Yeah, exactly. Do you want to hear the little poem I wrote?
I'd love to.
Very brief, sort of little. Whoops, that's not it. My pocket poems.
Yeah.
Ooh, we are in purple light.
Yeah.
So anyway, working miracles. What's it going to take to incite a revolution for love? Nothing came easy to Helen Keller except knowing everyone needs love and wants to be heard, deserves the chance to live, to help, because everyone has something unique to give, to share before they die. Helen's gift came from being stuck in the silent dark alone, with no way out known until Annie groped her way into the damp chamber of Helen's cave and pulled her screaming into the light of connection, expression, where they could see and tell us what they'd found down there, together, deep in the human heart. That love is most certainly blind. So maybe we all need to go back into the cave, learn to lean on each other in the dark, like infants, fall in love again with voices, the smell of skin, with touch, body heat, intimacy. Maybe then we can rediscover our vulnerability and value love as much as fear.
That last line, it talks about how we're going to survive.
Yeah, pretty much. Because we put so much, the reverse of that last line is basically how we were taught to survive and how we had to survive, not so long back. Fear, you know, fight or flight or whatever, you know, our reaction to our environment was how we lived or died. You know, that our sort of go it alone, tough, Western mentality made us focus more on fear, I think, than love. I mean, as opposed to those indigenous people maybe who lived as tribes of people and figured out that you needed to take care of each other, and love would help you survive probably as much or more than fear.
I think that people are fear-based and love-based, and that's how they interact with the world.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I think sometimes they don't even know it's fear. They take it as determination or as
Right.
control or...
Right, totally. And I think, you know, obviously, I think we're a couple of lovers.
We're big lovers.
I think poets tend to be lovers, actually. You know, no matter what they look like and what disguise they wear.
I just want to tell you one more thing.
What?
When I walk with my husband with the dogs, he wants to take the same route. He goes, we cross here. Okay, now the little dog has to go first, or the bigger dog will bite. And so I just walk along and go, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I used to go, why does he try and control everything? Why does he try and boss me? I want to like walk down the alley where I've never been before. I want to, and then I realized he's just trying to interpret the universe for me so I'm safe. He's trying to tell me the lay of the land so that I don't fall off the curb into the void. And it's all love-based,
Yeah.
but I was interpreting it as fear-based for a long time.
Right.
But see, now I'm 66 years old, and I'm a lot smarter than I ever was, and a lot more compassionate and wise and kind. So I realize that he's just showing me how he gets through,
Right,
and that I'll get through with him.
right. And he's been around you a long time.
Oh, yeah, yeah. 30 years
Wow.
of marriage, and then 6 years of living together in sin.
Oh, okay. We won't talk about that.
That's what poetry's about.
It is. It is.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Sheryl. Sheryl Noethe, the greatest living poet in Missoula, Montana.
Oh,
Thanks
honey.
for being with us, honey.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Since if it wasn't COVID, I'd give you a big hug and a kiss. But it is.
I'll
We shouldn't do that.
save that up.
Okay.